Who's this kid? And who is this guy, and why is he so much better than that kid? Well, that stupid kid is unfortunately me 4 years ago, when I was 14, and this guy you're seeing is Gavin Harrison. But let's back up a little bit. And by back up, I mean just give a little context as to who I am, because I'm sure you care so much. So once again, that kid in the screen is me. And I've been drumming since 3rd grade, which if you do the math adds up to 10 years. And although I'm certainly no Gavin Harrison, I would consider myself not half bad. Nobody cares! Get on with the video! Okay, back on track. Now that you have a basic idea of who I am, now would be a good time to explain the actual point of this video. The main thing I want to do in this video is examine just exactly how drummers think. I want to examine how a certain drummer applies his thought process to his actual playing, which basically means I'm going to show you what he's talking about when he's talking about it. Is that too vague for you? Well, another way to put it would be how he differentiates himself with his style, and how his thought process and musicality actually determines that. Still too confusing? How about something cool like the mind of a drummer? Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. Let's go! So as you might have guessed, I'm going to be talking about Gavin Harrison now. Born May 28th, 1963, he is most well known for being the drummer in the band Porcupine Tree, and he's one of the most respected drummers of today. He was awarded the Modern Drummer Magazine Readers' Poll for Best Progressive Drummer of the Year consecutively from 2007 to 2010, and once again in 2016. In 2011, he won the Best Prog Drummer in Drum USA magazine. We could sit here all day and discuss all the different awards he's won, but one more thing to note is that a Rolling Stone magazine poll showed that he was voted the 3rd best drummer in the last 25 years.
I started when I was 6 years old. My dad was a professional jazz trumpet player. He could play a little bit of drums too. I was naturally coordinated. I could dance really well when I was a kid. In fact, I went to ballet school when I was 6. I was just coordinated. So it felt like a natural thing to do. My dad had friends come around the house, they'd give me a pair of sticks, and it just felt natural. So I just had coordination. I was a good soccer player. Teachers wanted me to be in the soccer team, the school's soccer team. But I just didn't want to stay after school to do any activities because it meant I couldn't be at home playing the drums. My early years was playing along to my dad's jazz record collection, you know, things like Chet Baker, Art Farmer, Miles Davis. I was getting very much into Steve Gadd and Jeff Porcaro.
So I think it's a safe assumption to say he's quite passionate about his instrument. And although I've only discovered him somewhat recently, he's very quickly becoming one of my favorite drummers ever. One of my favorite aspects about him is just how unique he is. I can pretty much always tell when it's him drumming. He has such a unique sense of rhythm, which always makes his playing interesting and stand out. He intentionally plays in a way in which you are sometimes thrown off to where the one even is in the beat. And when I say when the one is, I mean that in terms of counting the song. So in most songs in which you count 1, 2, 3, 4, it's usually pretty easy to figure out when the one is going to come up if the song is in 4/4 time, which is the basic time signature of most music.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something, I think you'll understand.
Gavin and a lot of other drummers play in a way that are intentionally made to throw you off, which creates something known as a rhythmic illusion.
If you feel the need, to play a fill, you don't have to play it on bar 16 or bar 8. You don't have to keep hitting a 1. I know where the 1 is. You know, you're playing conductor on me. It's like, here comes the chorus, bosh. You know, you say, I know where the 1 is. You don't have to make it so obvious.
Rhythmic Illusions is the name of a book that Gavin released himself, which explores this concept that I'm describing as well as many other rhythmic concepts. On his website, Gavin himself describes what this book is all about, and this section pretty much describes it perfectly. Have you ever been listening to the radio, changed stations and tuned into a song that sounded as if it had a fantastically unusual rhythm, only to discover moments later in reality you had simply misinterpreted something quite straightforward?
Ways to make emotional effects in the music that didn't require technique as such as using displacement, such as using modulation, creating effects like you've moved the downbeat, creating effects like you've changed the tempo, even though it's just superimposed, and it makes it feel, just for a few moments, it feels like, oh, hang on, the drummer's changed tempo. It was just an effect like a sort of an Alfred Hitchcock moment where you think, oh, hang on, the floor's all gone. Well, oh, there we are. It's a very interesting tool because you can find a lot of variation out of very simple things that you can play. You can create numerous permutations of it. You might make a very simple fill and you think, oh, I play this fill all the time, it's really boring. If you start it a 16th later, suddenly it's a whole new fill. If you start it 3/16ths later, or play it in triplets, exactly the same fill, suddenly it's a whole new fill, and it'll really open your ideas, open your mind to other possibilities.
He has such a keen sense of when to put accents and beats to throw you off as a listener, and he does it in a way that isn't flashy or showy, but fits the song.
Now, if we're playing a certain tempo or a certain intensity, I'm not going to do this in the middle of a ballad. You know what I mean? It kind of feels wrong for the song.
There are plenty of other progressive rock or prog drummers that do this, but personally I think Gavin is one of the best at it, because he doesn't limit himself to just one style of music. His sense of versatility is also another reason why I think he's great. He can go from straight up prog metal fusion, to a light jazz song. Another thing I love about him is his creative use of time signatures. As I mentioned before, time signatures are basically a way to count a song. So that Beatles song I played before, as well as many other songs, are in 4/4 time signature. This is the most common one and one you'll hear in most songs on the radio. Now sometimes you can have what is called an odd time signature. An example of this would be 7/4 or 5/8. One of Gavin's most famous beats, and one that happens to utilize an odd time signature, is The Sound of Music. So in the same way you would count the Beatles song 1 to 4, you would count this song 1 to 7. It's a song that has a natural groove to it, despite its odd timing, so it doesn't sound like you're listening to something abnormal, which I think is the perfect way to utilize odd time signatures in the first place.
I think of it in 7. It's actually, when you break it down, the bass drum and snare drum are playing 7/16. So the bass drum and snare drum pattern are looping in 7/16. When I got to jam with it and play along with it, I immediately felt like I wanted to play 7/4 over the top.
A concept that Gavin utilizes in some of his odd time grooves is something called overriding. It goes in line with what I was saying before about odd time signatures not sounding like odd time signatures. It's a way to utilize musical complexity in a song without coming off as flashy.
Overriding is when you have a pattern like this in 7/8. And I'm playing eighth notes with my right hand.
Right.
So then I start to accent just the quarter notes.
Mm-hmm.
Now the audience don't have a jerky 7/8 feeling, and they're getting this steady pulse. You can see people dancing to it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I take it a bit further and play every third 16th note. So they're still getting regular pulses, but now there's, you know, like a counterpoint going on. They can hear ding, ding, like a new tempo coming out, kind of creating a 3D effect. I don't need the audience to know that this song's in 11/8 or 17/16. I don't want people to perceive that we're just being cocky and clever. Hey, look, we can play in 1916, check this out. I want it to have some musical reason.
Now, if you want to get really crazy with time signatures, there's this song called 19 Days. You thought 7 was complicated? Try counting to 19. Well, there is a way to simplify it, and Gavin is going to demonstrate it in the beginning of this video. Basically, there's a way to split up counting in 19 to make it less complicated.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So basically what Gavin is doing is splitting up the count of 19 into 2 7s and 1 5. That way, when you play the song, your brain doesn't have to keep track of counting to 19. Luckily, the melody is written in a way where it's somewhat obvious to know when to switch in between each section of 7, 7, and 5. Gavin goes into depth of how this song came to be on his DVD Rhythmic Horizons.
It started life many years ago as a riff that I wrote on a keyboard with a marimba sound. I was looking for quite a spiky pattern that had a few interesting twists and turns in it. I didn't realise what the time signature was when I first started playing it. I was just following what sounded like to me a musical set of notes that had an interesting rhythm. Later on I worked it out to be in 19/8, but please don't let that scare you or put you off, because it was never intended to be something deliberately clever just for the sake of it. And I think if you worked with it for a short while, you would soon start to feel it rather than count it.
It's songs like these that really give you an appreciation of how in-depth Gavin's songs can be.
Play a little piece for you now in 19/8. For those of you who are mathematically curious, it's split into 7/7/5. For those of you who aren't mathematically curious, good luck.
Whether it be from his work in Porcupine Tree, The Pineapple Thief, or King Crimson, or even just his solo performances, you can tell he has a great interest for exploring all the different possibilities that music can provide. Now there's one more concept involving time signatures I want to mention. Although playing in 19 is definitely complicated, there is something that can be even more complicated. It actually is possible to play different time signatures with different limbs, and I'm going to show you an example of that. You think I'm joking, don't you?
3, 4s, and 5s all played intermixed.
So we take a subdivision 16ths. The left foot is going to play quarter notes, so every 4 16ths. The bass drum is going to play every third 16th, so there's your group of 3s. The ride, with my right hand, I'm going to play a group of 5, the 1 on the bell, and the 3 and the 4 on the body. But just to turn it into a beat, every other time I go to the bell, I'm going to put a snare with it. So let's put it all together. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
So the 4s on the hi-hats, 3s on the bass drum, and the 5s on the ride cymbal.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
So as you can see, there is quite the amount of possibilities you can do with these types of things, and I am only scratching the surface of what can be accomplished. There are plenty of other concepts involving time signatures and groupings, which are explored by many drummers besides Gavin. So if you are interested, I encourage you to look up some of these yourself. Now earlier in the video I mentioned how one of the reasons I like Gavin so much is because of how distinct he is, and how I can always tell that it's him drumming. One of the reasons behind this is that he has a certain set of rhythms, beats, and types of fills that he plays throughout a lot of his performances, and when one of these things pops up, that's usually when I can tell it's him behind the kit. One of these Gavin Harrison-isms, as I like to call it, is something called the bluzda. Here's a clip of Gavin explaining what the bluzda is and how it can be applied to the kit.
Another nice variation is to play what is commonly known as the blushda. That involves a double note on the second right. So, and of course you can start replacing some of the notes with bass drum hits. You've got an awful lot of variation.
Here are some clips of Gavin utilizing the bluzda or a variation of it in some of his performances. For my fellow drummers watching who want to learn some of these licks, here are some transcriptions you can use. So just pause the video and take a screenshot if you want. Anyway, on to the next part. Now there's one more thing I want to cover about him, and that is just how amazing his drum kit sounds. He has, without a doubt, one of the best drum kits I have ever heard. If you're curious as to what a good drum kit sounds like as opposed to a bad drum kit, here's a little demonstration for you. Now obviously Gavin has an advantage in this comparison considering he has professional mics set up, but I can assure you that even if my kit had the same mics that he was using, the quality would still be drastically different. Now there are plenty of drummers who have amazing sounding kits, but Gavin sounds especially great due to the amount of care and thought he puts into how every drum is tuned and set up. He has a purpose for every little detail of how he adjusts the sounds of his kit, and it's done so in a way where it sounds best for you, the audience member, not for him listening. He intentionally makes it sound the best when it's heard through a microphone, which if you think about it makes a whole lot of sense if you're in the audience listening to him, or if you're listening to a recording of one of his songs.
The studio and the live, I have exactly the same drums tuned exactly the same way because they're playing through exactly the same microphones. I realised that people almost never hear me except through the microphones. So the sound of the drum through the microphone is more important than the sound of the drum acoustically. When you hear me on a record, it's through microphones. It's always through microphones. The microphones are the lenses of the camera. So when I'm at home, I play my drums, I put in the in-ear monitors and then shooting headphones on top.
Okay.
So I'm completely deaf. And if I tune the drum and play with the drum with the microphone, get it to sound good, and I take off, the in-ears and the protection, maybe the snare drum doesn't sound that good, but I know it sounds good in the microphone, and that's the important thing.
Another reason his kit sounds great is because he puts a lot of time into trial and error processes, which determines what the best possible option for him is.
Right.
And I have a studio, which means that I can record all the drums, take them away, put a new drum set, record the drums, and then listen back to back. I can listen to drum kit A and drum kit B. Doom, 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 doom. Really make a good comparison because it's the same microphones, the same head that I tune them the same EQ, everything. And I do a lot of tests with microphones, with bass drum beaters, with everything, snare wires, overhead microphones. You know, if I have the opportunity to borrow some microphones, then I will test them. And if they're better than what I'm using, then I want to buy them.
He also puts effort into designing things like his drumsticks.
Making a stick requires some skill. So I need a stick that's a bit of an all-rounder, you know, versatile enough to play really heavy, butted right up against something that's really light. Sticks are sort of things that you're kind of unaware of. If they're good, you don't know they're there. It's only when sticks are wrong that you start to think, oh, it's front heavy, or it's back heavy, or it's not straight, or you become more aware of sticks when they're not right. It's a work of art, and so we've gone through, 4 different versions of it until I'm really happy, and I'm a very fussy sort of person. I'm really happy with the balance of it. They're balanced and they're straight, and they're going to do what I want them to do.
So that just about covers it for the concepts I wanted to go over for this video. Hopefully I've been able to analyze the mind of Gavin Harrison as thoroughly as possible. Hopefully I've been able to explain how he applies his thoughts and ideas to his playing. And hopefully I've been a good enough host for you throughout this journey. And with all that being said, I leave you with this, a clip of Gavin illustrating his passion for music.
It's something really precious if you know how to get something out of music. If you just put it on while you're skateboarding down the road, and it's just, you know, it's a shame to me, because it's been a whole life for me, and I'm sure for you too. It's been such a life-changing thing, you know. It's been my whole life, listening and playing music.